These four silent enemies are killing your discipline. There's a strange thing about discipline. It's one of the most praised virtues in modern life, yet one of the most misunderstood. We talk about it as if it's a muscle, something you just need to flex harder, use more often, push through. But that metaphor is incomplete, because discipline isn't just about action, it's about attention. It's about where your mind goes when no one's watching. It's about the quiet decisions made in the shadows of your day, the moments no one claps for, the choices no one sees. It's easy to think we fail at discipline because we're lazy or unmotivated or weak. But what if that's not the real reason? What if there are silent enemies, forces we can't name, that are draining our discipline without us even knowing it? Let me ask you something that might sting a little. When was the last time you broke a promise you made to yourself? Not a big one, a small one. Waking up early, saying no to another scroll through your phone, finishing that thing you said you'd do. And how did you justify it? A whisper of just this once. A rationalization that I've had a hard day. That voice, you know, the one, it never yells. It whispers. It's gentle. It sounds like you, but it isn't. It's one of the silent enemies. And the tragedy is, most people never recognize it for what it is. They think it's self-care. They think it's realistic. But it's sabotage dressed as compassion. And it's killing your discipline.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
The first silent enemy is the comfort narrative. This is the story we tell ourselves, that our comfort is always justified. But it's the idea that rest is always good, that pleasure is always a reward, that avoiding pain is wisdom. Now, don't twist this: rest is essential. But the moment comfort becomes your default goal, you stop growing. Comfort is seductive. It doesn't scream at you, it invites you. It says, why suffer? Why push? You've done enough. But here's the truth: discipline doesn't grow in comfort. It grows in friction, in resistance, in choosing the harder path, not because you like pain, but because you've chosen purpose over ease. And the comfort narrative is clever. It's built into culture. It's built into how we market everything from food to apps to relationships. We're sold the idea that the goal of life is to feel good, to feel safe, to feel entertained. But what if that's the lie? What if the real goal is to become something more than you are now? And what if the price of that transformation is discomfort, repeated, intentional, embraced discomfort? That's not a message that sells well, but it's the foundation of discipline. And if you don't challenge the comfort narrative, it will quietly kill your drive, your hunger, your edge. The second enemy is fragmented attention. We live in an era where attention is the most valuable currency. And the tragedy is, most people are broke. Think about this. How many times a day do you choose what to focus on? Not reactively, not out of habit, but consciously, deliberately. Because every time you scroll, switch tabs, check notifications, you're training your brain to fracture, to jump, to avoid stillness. And discipline cannot live in a fractured mind. It needs depth. It needs sustained focus. But we've trained ourselves to fear that. The philosopher Pascal once said, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. That's more true today than ever, because to build discipline you need silence. You need space. You need to hold your attention like it matters, because it does. The quality of your attention determines the quality of your actions. And if your attention is constantly hijacked, your discipline will always be reactive, weak, and inconsistent. So the question is, who owns your attention? Do you, or do algorithms, notifications, habits you never questioned? If you don't own your attention, you don't own your discipline. And if you don't own your discipline, you don't own your life. But here's the twist. These enemies aren't loud. They're not villains with swords. They're gentle, familiar. They feel like friends. And that's what makes them dangerous. You don't fight them with willpower alone. You fight them with awareness, with philosophy, with the courage to ask, why do I choose what I choose? Whose life am I really living? We're just getting started, because there are two more silent enemies. And the next one is so embedded in our identity that we don't even recognize it's there, yet it silently shapes every decision we make and every promise we break. The identity trap, how self-labels quietly sabotage your discipline every day. Here's a question that might change everything. Who told you who you are? Think about it. Not just your name or your job or your background. I mean the deeper identity. I'm not a morning person. I'm bad with commitment. I've always been kind of lazy. I'm the creative type, not the organized type. Where do these labels come from? Are they really reflections of your essence? Or are they just stories borrowed, repeated, reinforced until they became your reality? This is the third silent enemy of discipline, the identity trap. And it's more dangerous than the others because it doesn't feel like an enemy. It feels like you, but it's not. It's a script. A set of beliefs you've internalized so deeply that you no longer question them. But here's the truth. Your identity is not fixed. It's not a cage. It's a pattern. It's a habit. And habits can be broken, rewritten, transformed. But not until you recognize the invisible power they have over your discipline. Let's go deeper. Every action you take either reinforces or rewrites your identity. If you say, I'm not someone who sticks to things, every time you quit early, you strengthen that belief. And the more you believe it, the more it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't even have to try to fail, it's already decided. Because your brain wants to be consistent with who it thinks you are. That's identity inertia. It's not laziness. It's neurological loyalty to a story you never chose consciously. Think about someone who has tried to build a fitness habit. They go for a week, maybe 2, and then they miss a day. And instead of seeing that as a momentary fluctuation, they say, see, this always happens. I just can't stick to things. And just like that, the identity trap closes. Not because of failure, but because of the interpretation of failure. Discipline dies not in the moment of action, but in the meaning we attach to that action. And meaning is shaped by identity. But there's a philosophical twist here. If your identity is a story, then you are not the story, you are the storyteller. You are the one who chooses which version of you gets repeated. And that's the door out of the trap. You don't build discipline by forcing action. You build it by becoming someone who identifies as disciplined. Not in a fake, affirmational way. Not by saying I am disciplined while your actions say otherwise. But by aligning your choices, small, daily, private choices, with the person you want to become. And this is where it gets even deeper. Who benefits from you believing that you are a fixed thing? That your personality, your energy levels, your willpower are permanent? The answer is the systems that profit from your predictability. If you believe you'll never change, you're easier to sell to. You're easier to pacify. You're easier to control. That's not a conspiracy. That's psychology. People with fluid identities are dangerous to stagnant systems. They don't follow the same patterns. They don't stay in the same cages. They wake up one day and think, what if I'm not who I thought I was? And in that question, they begin to break the rules. So here's the practical application. Stop saying, I am followed by anything you don't want to become permanent. Instead, say, I'm practicing. Say, I'm learning to. Say, up until now, I've had a tendency to. Give your story movement. Give it breath. Because if you keep telling yourself you're undisciplined, you will build your life around that belief. You'll avoid challenges that require consistency. You'll sabotage routines that threaten your self-image. And worst of all, you'll never find out who you could have been. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. What identity are you protecting that's keeping you from being disciplined? Are you clinging to the story of the spontaneous one, the rebel, the free spirit, because the idea of structure feels like a betrayal of your past self? What if that past self was just surviving? What if discipline isn't death to your spirit, but the container that lets it finally breathe? This is where philosophy meets action. Because the ancient Stoics understood this long before neuroscience did. Epictetus said, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Discipline isn't about exertion. It's about identity alignment. It's about becoming internally coherent. When your actions match your values and your values match your vision, your discipline becomes effortless. Not because it's easy, but because it's natural. It fits. It feels like home. But the identity trap is tricky. It will whisper to you the moment you slip. See, I knew you couldn't do it. That's when you have to answer back, not with punishment, but with philosophy. You say, that was a moment, not a definition. You say, I am not my past tendencies. I am my present alignment. You say, every time I choose discipline, I rewrite the story. And you do, every day, quietly, invisibly. Until one day you look back and realize you are no longer who you were, and yet somehow more you than ever before. The hidden addiction to incompletion, why your brain loves quitting, and how to break the cycle. We've all felt it, that strange satisfaction when we don't finish something. When we walk away from a goal before it's complete, when we quit just before the breakthrough, when we leave things hanging. And yet, paradoxically, we also feel guilt, regret, sometimes shame. So why do we still do it? Why does the cycle of starting strong and fading away feel so familiar, so oddly comforting, even when it hurts us? The answer is uncomfortable, but necessary, because on some deep psychological level, we are addicted to incompletion. Not because it's good for us, but because it's safe. This is the fourth silent enemy of discipline, the hidden addiction to incompletion. And it thrives beneath our conscious awareness. It's not just procrastination. It's not just laziness. It's a pattern of beginning with energy, then pulling back when the stakes get real. Because finishing something, truly finishing, requires more than effort. It demands identity transformation. The moment you complete something, you are no longer who you were. You've crossed a threshold. And that scares us more than we're willing to admit. See, incompletion gives us an escape hatch. As long as the thing isn't finished, we can still believe in its potential. We can still say, I could have made it big, or I was working on something great. We can live in the illusion of ambition without facing the reality of execution. And for many of us, that illusion is more comfortable than the truth. Because the truth is, finishing something forces us to stand naked in front of our results. No more promises, no more potential, just what is. And that's terrifying when our self-worth is tied to performance. But let me ask you a question that cuts through all the noise. What would it mean about you if you actually finished everything you started? Not just tasks, but goals, visions, dreams. Would it mean you're capable? Would it mean you're responsible for your own greatness? Would it mean you have no more excuses left to hide behind? Because that's the real fear, not failure, but success. True completion strips us of the safety of almost. And for many, almost has become a home. Your brain, biologically, even rewards you for quitting. Not long-term, of course, but in the moment. When you walk away from something hard, your brain often releases a little dopamine relief, a sensation of freedom. This is the same mechanism behind addiction. You press the escape button and you get instant gratification. Compared to the long, uncertain road of discipline and delayed reward, quitting feels like a win. But it's a short-term win that creates a long-term pattern of powerlessness. So how do we break it? How do we make completion the new addiction? First, we have to start small. Completion doesn't begin with massive goals. It begins with micro-promises. I will write for 10 minutes. I will finish this workout. I will clean this one drawer. Your brain needs to associate finishing with reward. Not with exhaustion, not with criticism, not with perfection, but with closure, with peace, with pride. That rewiring is subtle but transformative. Second, we must kill the fantasy of potential. Potential is beautiful, but it can become a prison. If you always live in what could be, you never face what is. Completion is an act of courage. It says, I'm ready to be judged. I'm ready to be seen. And most of all, it says, I'm ready to move on. Because here's the secret. Unfinished things don't just sit still. They pull at you. They take up space in your mind. They drain energy. Every project, every goal, every decision left incomplete becomes a weight you carry. And over time, it numbs your desire to start anything new. So ask yourself, what am I afraid to finish? What project, what conversation, what commitment have I left half alive because I'm afraid of what completion might reveal? What part of me is addicted to the safety of almost? These questions matter more than any productivity hack. Because until you deal with your relationship to finishing, discipline will always feel like a performance rather than a transformation. Completion is a discipline, not a task on a checklist, but a way of being. It's a mindset that says, I don't start things to escape. I start things to become. And when you live that way, everything changes. You stop measuring your life by what's pending and start measuring it by what you become through the process. Owning discipline, the final philosophy of becoming who you were meant to be. At the end of all this, after confronting the comfort narrative, reclaiming your attention, dismantling the identity trap, and breaking the addiction to incompletion, you're left with a single question: what kind of life do I want to live, and who must I become to live it? Because ultimately, discipline isn't about productivity. It's not about waking up at 5 a.m. or checking off to-do lists. It's about ownership. It's about stepping fully into the responsibility of shaping your own existence, not as a reaction to the world, but as an author of it. Ownership is terrifying because it removes all excuses. It forces us to admit that we are not only the product of our past, but the architects of our future. And if that's true, then every act of discipline is not just a habit, it's a vote, a declaration. A statement that says, I no longer outsource my becoming. But that's the final philosophy of discipline. It's not about being controlled. It's about becoming free. Freedom, ironically, is often confused with indulgence. We think freedom is doing what we want, when we want, how we want. But that's chaos. That's comfort disguised as autonomy. Real freedom, the kind that lasts, is born from boundaries, from structure. From the quiet courage to say, I will do what is hard, because what is hard is what makes me whole. And that kind of freedom is rare, and it's the fruit of a disciplined life. But if discipline is so powerful, why do so few people truly own it? Because owning discipline means giving up the fantasy that someone will come save you. It means facing the mirror and saying, no one is coming to fix this. No one is coming to make me move. It's me. It's always been me. That moment is both sobering and liberating. Sobering because it dissolves the illusion. Liberating because it gives you power back. And the truth is, most people fear their own power. They don't want to know what they're capable of, because if they knew, they'd have no excuse not to pursue it. So they hide behind distractions, identities, unfinished tasks, and comfort. But here's the deeper question. What would your life look like if you stopped hiding from your own potential? What would happen if you stopped negotiating with your lower self and started listening to the part of you that knows what you're here to do? Owning discipline is not about becoming a machine. It's about becoming aligned. It's about living in such a way that your actions match your purpose, your habits reflect your values, and your days are not just full but fulfilled. And that alignment isn't found all at once. It's forged in the fire of daily choices. In the moments you want to give in but don't. In the moments you want to delay but act. In the moments you want to shrink but rise. So here is the final philosophical truth. Discipline is not the destination. It's the path. It's the bridge between who you are and who you were meant to be. And the only way to cross that bridge is to walk it step by step, breath by breath, day by day. Not perfectly, not without failure, but with ownership. Because when you own your discipline, you own your life. And when you own your life, you become the kind of person who doesn't just dream but builds, who doesn't just hope but acts, who doesn't just survive but creates. So I leave you with one final question, one that only you can answer. If you became the most disciplined version of yourself starting today, what would your life look like 1 year from now? Sit with that. Not just as a thought, but as a decision. Now go. Be who you were meant to be.